Okay, so what if I told you that one of the simplest ideas you've ever learned, the whole concept of equals, is actually one of the most complex, hard-won achievements in the entire history of human thought? I know, it sounds crazy. We just take it for granted, right? But it's not a given. It's actually a super sophisticated piece of intellectual technology. So today, let's pull back the curtain and explore the hidden engineering behind the humble equals sign. A equals A, the law of identity, right? A thing is, well, it's itself. It feels like the most basic, most obvious rule in all of logic. We just accept it without even thinking about it. It doesn't really feel like a rule, does it? It feels more like a law of nature. But, and this is the key, that simple statement is hiding a massive intellectual battle.
Yeah, what if this simple truth just isn't that simple? What if the statement A equals A isn't the starting point, but actually the finish line? The result of a huge effort to solve a really deep problem right at the heart of logic itself. This forces us to ask a much bigger question. What does equals really mean? And why on earth was it so difficult to nail down?
Okay, so to get to the bottom of that, we have to look at the massive problem that logicians were up against. See, for any system of reasoning to work, we're talking math, philosophy, even the computer code that runs your phone, the idea of equals has to be rock solid. It's the foundation. It just can't be a moving target. Because if the meaning of one and the same can just change depending on the situation, well, the entire structure of any argument just falls apart.
Right. So to stop that from happening, to prevent the whole system from collapsing, logicians needed a real solution. And they had a big realization. They couldn't just rely on how we use the word same in everyday life, how it's kind of flexible. No, they had to intentionally engineer a completely unshakable definition. This is what we call an invariant meaning for identity, one that would stay true no matter what.
And that core idea is called invariant meaning. A really good way to wrap your head around this is to think about the standard meter stick, the one they keep locked in a vault in Paris. We need that one single, unchanging definition so we can all agree on what a meter actually is. Well, it's the exact same idea for logic. Logic needs its own fixed, abstract standard for equals, so that every single argument can be measured against the very same constant.
So the big question is, how do you actually build this universal standard? Well, the breakthrough was to lock the idea of identity to something called the principle of substitutivity. Now that sounds fancy, but the idea is actually super simple. It just means that if two things are truly equal, you should be able to swap one for the other in any sentence, in any situation, without changing whether that sentence is true or false. Think about a Jenga tower. If you had two blocks that were absolutely, perfectly, 100% identical in every single way, you could just swap them out, and the tower wouldn't even wobble. It would be completely stable. That's what substitutivity does. It guarantees the structural integrity of a logical argument. And here's where it gets really powerful. When you lock equals to this incredibly strict rule, something amazing happens. You automatically rule out any kind of relative identity. I mean, think about it. If you can swap A for B in every single context without changing the truth, then there can't possibly be a context where they're not equal. And just like that, you forced equals to become a single, universal constant.
Now, once you've created this perfect, logical constant, it immediately brings up a big question. How does this super strict version of equals compare to the way we all use the word in the real world, day to day? Well, as it turns out, there's a huge difference. The absolute identity that logic needs is totally different from the kind of messy, practical way we use the concept. Basically, logicians had to draw a big line in the sand. So on one side of that line, you've got absolute identity. This is the pure stuff. It's unchanging, constant, and you know it's true just through reason. But on the other side, you have relative identity. And honestly, this is the one we use all the time. It's all about context. Like you might say two cars are the same model, but you obviously don't mean they're the exact same physical car. See, that kind of identity always needs a category. You have to ask, the same what? But for absolute identity to work its magic in logic, it has to be completely free of all those little asterisks.
So this really gives us two different layers of meaning for a concept. You have the contextual semantics. That's just how we apply it and interpret it in different day-to-day situations. But then you have the eidetic semantics, and this is the cool part. It's like the concept's technology of birth, its original blueprint. It's where that core invariant meaning was first forged. And for the equal sign to work the way it needs to as a logical constant, that core blueprint has to be absolutely airtight.
And this whole effort to create a core meaning for equals, it's not just some dried technical exercise. It's actually a really deep philosophical quest. A quest to create what you could call a perfect conceptual word. And to really get just how ambitious this is, we have to bring in one of the all-time greats in logic, Gottlob Frege.
So Frege's whole thing was that if you want to achieve ultimate clarity in your thinking, you have to find concepts that are, in his words, superior to all the others, concepts that are totally pure, unlimited, and universal. And this whole search for an invariant equals, it's a textbook example of that quest. It's the attempt to take the simple idea of one and the same and elevate it into one of these supreme conceptual words.
And that's exactly what absolute identity becomes. It becomes a conceptual word. Its nature is unlimited. In fact, it's so purely defined that it works perfectly even for things that don't actually exist. Think about a unicorn. Logically, a unicorn is identical to itself, right? It doesn't matter that there are no unicorns, the logic still holds. The only thing you need for a concept this powerful is for its meaning to be nailed down with complete and utter certainty.
Okay, so now that we've seen this incredible engineering effort that went into defining equals, we can finally go back to where we started. We can look at that simple little formula, A equals A, in a totally new light.
So yes, the statement A equals A absolutely expresses a fundamental truth. But here's the big takeaway from all this. The real power isn't in the symbol itself. That equal sign doesn't have any inherent magic. No, all of its strength comes from the incredible amount of work that happened behind the scenes. All that effort to forge an invariant, absolute meaning for what identity even is. And that's why A equals A isn't just some obvious fact we take for granted. It's an achievement. It's a simple statement that's built on top of an incredibly profound and carefully constructed foundation.
And that really leaves us with one last big question to think about. If a concept that seems as simple and obvious as equals has this much hidden depth, this much intentional design behind it, what other basic ideas are out there? You know, the ones you and I use every single day without even thinking about them. Which of those are secretly the invisible rules that are governing the very structure of how we think?